On July 21st, 1993, Dr. Avraham Biran, an Israeli archaeologist, discovered a remarkable stone bearing an inscription written in ancient Aramaic. He had found the first reference outside the Bible to King David and a ruling dynasty, evidence of the house of David.
Raise up a king, one of your own. Call him to lead us, establish his throne. I have chosen a shepherd after my heart, King of my people, my anointed one.
Shalom, hello again. Well, continuing with our series, The House of David, inspired by the finding of the stone which says House of David on it in Aramaic, found last year at Tel Dan in northern Galilee. Absolute proof of the existence of David and his dynasty. We have seen David as a shepherd, as a court musician, as a warrior, and now as an outlaw, as King Saul pursued him out of his jealousy. And now we are going to see him anointed king. 2 Samuel 2 tells the story right from the beginning of the chapter. It came to pass after this that David inquired of the Lord, saying, Shall I go up into any cities of Judah? And the Lord said unto him, Go up. And David said, Whither shall I go up? And he said, Unto Hebron. Hebron, the world's oldest Jewish city. Abraham lived there 1,000 years before David, and David is here now. If we'll pass another 1,000 years and then another 700 years, the first Muslim will be born. David went up thither, and his men that were with him did David bring up, every man with his household, and they dwelt in the cities of Hebron. And the men of Judah came, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah. He was later to be king of all Israel after 7 years or so, and he solidified his kingdom finally by conquering the city of the Jebusites, Jerusalem, this city. And there he established the city of David, a small version of modern Jerusalem. Archaeologist Danny Bahat explains the original city of David.
We are standing now on the eastern slope of the hill of the city of David. It's a very steep slope, beginning somewhere down in the Sidon Valley or Kedron Valley, down below there, and going all the way up to the top. Although the shape of the slope today is quite modern, when it was made following the excavations, where all the dump from the excavations was cleared away by tractors, nevertheless, the natural topography, which consists of bedrock, can be easily seen. We should close our eyes and see King David and his army standing in the valley below and having to overcome this steep slope all the way up here and suddenly hitting the city wall, which was excavated in the early 80s, and you can see the entire extent of it going all the way further to the north. Undoubtedly, one can notice at the end the Temple Mount of today and the depths of centuries, all the depths which were shooted down through the centuries, covering all the remains. Now we can imagine King David and his army and his troops going up the way we are doing now, getting all the way after a real strain coming up from the valley, going all the way up to the city walls, which one can see here. As we stand here, we find ourselves in the same position as King David about 3,000 years ago, trying to overcome the city wall which you see here. That city wall was not so easily conquerable, and therefore we have got in the Bible two descriptions of the conquest of the city. One of them in the second book of Samuel, and the other in the Chronicles. But the descriptions differ. The one in 2 Samuel describes the conquest of the city by something which is called the tube. Unfortunately, by later translators, it was named the water shaft, and thus when in the 19th century a water shaft was discovered above the spring further up the hill, people attributed it to the very same water shaft which the 2 Samuel description refers to. No one is sure today if this is really the case. Most likely it was not, because the word which is used in the Bible means tube, and tube could be either a shaft or any kind of water installation. And I would like to remind people that actually tube may also mean a musical instrument. As much as Jericho was conquered by the trumpets, which caused the collapse of the wall, so could Jerusalem under King David be conquered by the tube, which was played, and thus actually causing moral collapse in the city itself. In any rate, one thing is for sure, that this wall, which looks today quite low because of the destruction, was definitely a wall of great strength in the past. Below us, the small walls, which can be seen everywhere, are actually quite testimony to the fact that in the 8th century BC, let's say under King Hezekiah, the city exploded with a mass of people who lived there, and many of the settlers preferred to live outside the city wall rather in the congested inside of the city. Here, according to 2 Samuel, this was the city of Jebus, or the city of Zion, which was named later, after the conquest, was named the city of David. Let us go into the city to see the network of streets or anything possible from the inside. But as I say, the city of David, immediately great question comes out. According to the biblical description, it was in this hill, in the city of David, that all the Davidic dynasty was buried. Only few places, some caves, one of which can be seen not far from here, is a very typical one. We believe this was the royal cemetery of the kings of Judah, which again, as is said in the Bible, were buried inside the city of David. The problem, though, is that the name Zion moved from here during the destruction of the city by Nebuchadnezzar the Chaldean in the 6th century, moved from here to another hill, which is further west from us. And already the Jewish historian of the 1st century, Josephus Flavius, he already describes Zion elsewhere around the traditional tomb of David today, which is much later. So as I said, let us go into the city and to see what is inside.
We remember from Scripture the capture of Jerusalem by King David and the army of Israel. At 1 Chronicles 11:4-7, and David and all Israel went to Jerusalem, which is Jebus, where the Jebusites were, the inhabitants of the land. And the inhabitants of Jebus said to David, "Thou shalt not come hither." Nevertheless, David took the castle of Zion, and David dwelt in the castle. Therefore they called it the city of David. From inside the walls of the city of David, here again is archaeologist Danny Bahat.
We are standing now in the inside of the city. We have just crossed the city walls, not through a gate, but merely a breach in the wall, and we are standing inside the city. The interesting thing about it is that actually when Jerusalem was built as the capital of Israel, it was built in a kind of a crisscross plan, and we can see in front of us a little lane going perpendicular to the wall, coming all the way down from the top of the hill down to the wall. Another little lane can be seen just ahead of us, further north, when a very little narrow lane between two houses is discernible. As we walk further, we'll cross here the sewage system of the city, which was very developed and which is very typical to the history of the country, where in the Iron Age, or let's say the late biblical period, every city had a very good system of sewage, usually a plaster channel covered with stone slabs and so invisible, avoiding the smells which must have been a typical feature in the cities in the biblical time. From the way the houses are built, with such a beautiful walls, it may be an indication that actually the city prospered in the later centuries of the Judean kingdom, namely 8th, 7th, up to 6th century, when it was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. Since the hill is built on very steep slope, undoubtedly a system of terraces must have been built, one house over the other, and so all the way up the slope. As a matter of fact, we believe that the famous Miloh, M-I-L-O-H, which is mentioned in the Bible as being built by King David, King Solomon, and King Hezekiah, are all actually one thing: the royal way by which those terraces in the city of David were built. One must understand that all our understanding of the city of David is drawn from the excavations which were carried out on the eastern slope of the city. What about the top of the hill? What about the western slope of it, since it is engulfed by two valleys? Well, during the centuries, the constant rebuilding and destructions of the city caused that the top and the west were completely shaven away by the later settlers of the city, and all what is left to us, the archaeologists, is only the eastern slope, which, with its abundance of discoveries and finds, which altogether may serve us the information. I would like to mention one important fact. After the destruction of the temple by Nebuchadnezzar, the city was re-inhabited by the repatriates from Babylon, and as late as the destruction of the second city by Titus the Roman in 70 AD. It was excluded then from the city, and when a new Jerusalem was built, all the area which we see today was outside the city, and from this point we can see further up the present city wall up there where the Temple Mount is. Never was this area again a part of the city, which from the archaeological point of view is quite good. The place was abandoned, erosion covered the city, and only due to the sequence of excavations on that hill, which started in the 19th century, we learned so much about the city. Why is it so important? The city wasn't too big. The city was important because the city of David is the historical nucleus of the development of Jerusalem, which was founded right where we are sitting now in the 3rd millennium BC, which means Jerusalem is actually existing non-stop for over 5,000 years, and it was right here. The reason for doing it right here is due to the spring, the only perennial spring in the vicinity of Jerusalem, the spring of Gihon, which is so famous in so many traditions because it flows into the pool of Siloam, which every reader of the scriptures will know. The spring of Gihon, the pool of Siloam, the Miloh just mentioned, all those together form this beautiful uniqueness of the city of David, which I'm quite sure future excavations will reveal much more of its glory, and thus creating a fantastic feature of one of the oldest inhabited cities in the world. This is a fact that people tend to forget. One of the oldest cities in the world, and already during the Roman period, it was praised by the non-Jewish writers as one of the oldest and most beautiful cities which the Middle East ever knew.
Some Israeli settlers give new meaning to the term living on the edge. The ancient city of David we've been looking at was actually given to the Arabs when Jerusalem was divided, one of those modern-day illogical ideas. But some Israelis stay with their ancient heritage, whoever is there. And less than 100 yards from where Danny showed us the ruins of the city of David are settlers, and we'll be with them after this.
Not all the neighbors near David are the same. There are different families and each has their own philosophy. And I'm sure that there are many here that are not happy to see us enter and come into the city of David.
My husband and I have been thinking about it for years since we've been watching Zola on television. And we thought if we ever retired, which we just did at the end of April, we'd go with Zola, only Zola. Well, it's been grand. I loved every minute of it. It's been wonderful, and I think everyone should come.
Tour the Holy Land with Zola Levitt. Call or write for more information.
Why did King David place his palace in the middle of an Arab village? This was the innocent question of the inquisitive 4-year-old son of Aaron and Esther Horowitz. You see, this Jewish family lives in the biblical city of David, just south of the Temple Mount. Today, this area is occupied primarily by Arabs. However, archaeologists believe that underneath their houses lie the foundations of the ancient palace used by King David. Our Israeli coordinating producer, Bill Dackman, asked him to tell us more about the settlement that they call home.
The entire Jewish settlement is centered around different ancient sites. For instance, we've got down by the spring of Gihon, where King Solomon was anointed. We have a number of families. We've got down by Warren's Shaft, which is a biblical secret tunnel that goes down to the spring. We've got a number of families living there. And down south of City of David, we've got another enclave of families living next to what might be the tombs of the kings of David, the house of David. So you can see that the atmosphere is very biblical. We feel very at home.
Did your neighbors give you a nice warm reception, you know?
Well, we expected it to be much worse. We were told that we're going to live just, among Arabs and that they're not too friendly and we have to be very careful. And we had a very nice surprise. We were very fortunate to have very nice neighbors. They were very friendly from the moment we came in. They came with fruits, they gave us fruits, and they invited us to their kids' weddings, and they've been very, very nice and friendly. We don't really talk about politics or anything like that. We just have like a very sort of everyday neighborly relationship.
Well, how do your children relate to the neighbors?
As neighbors, we, they give candies to our kids, we give to their grandchildren. They don't have kids our kids' age. Mm-hmm. But I think they feel comfortable with us here, and we feel comfortable with them here. Of course, not all the neighbors near David are the same. There are different families, and each has their own philosophy. And I'm sure that there are many here that are not happy to see us enter and come into the city of David.
But it was also interesting for the kids to learn to know Arabs from close. They'd never met Arabs before. They knew about Arabs, whether they were terrorists and they were dangerous. And then we came to live around next to them, and they learned they're human beings. They're nice. I think for them it's a very unique experience of coexistence.
It breaks the stereotype, definitely. Though they have the opportunity to see the other side as well, because they're stoned from time to time. We have in Ir David, which is connected up with the Arab village of Silwan.
Ir David
is City of David, is connected up with the Arab village of Silwan, which is quite hostile. And there they have a lot of fundamentalists, a lot of Hamas, a lot of PLO. And from time to time, our kids suffer the brunt of that hostility. If they're taking our Jeep, we have the Jewish settlement has a Jeep, which is watched over by the guards. We have our own guards here. And from time to time, it's stoned when they come under Silwan. And so they're learning the facts of Israeli life up close, next to the surface, as you might say.
Let me ask a hypothetical question. What do you both think would happen today if the security guards that are here would not be here?
I think it would be rather dangerous. With all the coexistence and all the nice relationships we have, it can only continue as long as we know there's somebody here who keeps the order. And although some of the Arabs are very friendly, others are much more hostile, and it wouldn't be safe for us to live here.
Would you stay?
I wouldn't.
I might. We're rationalists. I mean, we're religious people, and obviously there's a mystical dimension to that, but we don't put our life on the line. We take precautions, and when we came here, that was one of the things we wanted to make sure of, that we have a proper security force and that life here would be calm and peaceful, and we work to that end.
Jewish settlers here are not looked upon as well received in the press today. What would you say, and what would you tell those people today that say that you have no right to live here?
I think our right is as old as the roots beneath the ground. We're part of the Jewish people. We've returned to the land. There's an ingathering of the exiles today from all walks of the face of the Jewish earth. And I think to say today that a Jew has no right to live in Jerusalem, it's not only blasphemy, but it's counter to logic. And it is true that there are part of the press and part of the media that see us as infringing on somebody else's rights. We're here legally. We've come to live peacefully. We belong here and will remain here.
On that day when I run with the horses, I won't stumble, I'll come from behind. And faster than footmen, the race will be won, for you've made me stronger with time. Our God is in heaven, He hasn't changed, filled with compassion and grace. They are new every morning, faithful is He to those who would seek His face. Then in heaven I'll run with the horses, no more stumbling or falling behind. I've beaten the footmen, the race finally done, for you brought me through one last time. That day I'll run with the horses, I won't stumble, I'll come from behind. Faster than footmen, my race will be won. You made me stronger.
You know, Jerusalem has been there so long, and the drama about it so deep. It's been the capital of Israel for 3,000 years, put it that way, whether the people were in it or out of it. David made it the capital 3,000 years ago, and it is again today. In 1980, it was certified again by the modern Israeli government. My guide once came from Jerusalem to Dallas, and to entertain him one day, we sent him on the city tour. Your city probably has a little bus tour, and they took him around and showed him ancient Dallas. There was a building 80 years old. Well, 3,000 years ago, David bought the threshing floor from Aruna, and Jerusalem was a settled city with high walls and the largest temple ever made with human hands before the Greek Empire was thought of, while people in Europe were living in the wild. And they were writing, and they were making a law, and they were holding courts, and they were worshiping. And God, it's special to him. It's mentioned, thousands of times in the Bible. No times in the Quran, by the way. That's the number of times it's mentioned in the Quran. If you hear the contrary, pick up the Quran and find it. The Jewish claim to it is unquestioned, and those who are bargaining about splitting it up, or those who say, as Arafat recently did, Jerusalem was always and always will be the capital of Palestine, a perfectly meaningless statement, should read some scripture. Because this place is special to him, and the prophecy about it is very drastic. Let me quote from Zechariah 12, end times prophecy. The burden of the word of the Lord for Israel, saith the Lord. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in the siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem. And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered against it. A word to the wise. the prophecy of Zechariah about Jerusalem goes on. It gets happier. I will pour upon the house of David and all the supplicants the spirit of grace and supplication, and they shall look upon me whom they've pierced. And it speaks of the ultimate salvation of Israel when the Jewish people come to the Messiah. But we should know that in this day when there are false claims about Jerusalem and so on, at least believers beware. Don't accidentally support a claim. Don't think that to make some temporary peace or what's called peace that we're going to run up against the Word of God, because there's a real warning in here. It is a burdensome stone. It is something you can cut yourself on, let me tell you. The Muslim claim that Muhammad was there, I've dealt with it on a former program, is a legend. It's not written in the Quran. It's just not there. They say it's there, but it's not there. It says he dreamed of a road to heaven from a mountain. Well, placing that mountain in Jerusalem is supposed to make that a Muslim city. It's incredible. I'm glad he didn't say Dallas, because I guess they'd be after my house. The House of David stone proves beautifully the existence of the dynasty of David, and that in turn proves this history and this succession of kings and this city under Jewish primacy, under Jewish rule. When Dr. Baran found the stone, it put to rest a whole lot of, David never existed, as the liberal seminaries say, or as Muslims who went through the countries defacing statues, especially of David, to wipe out the record, were defeated by this stone. They didn't find it and couldn't hide it. And here it is. Now, we've made a model of it. I showed it on a former program. The House of David stone is, this is an exact copy of the important line that it shows the words House of David, Beit David in Hebrew and in ancient Aramaic. And we've made a little copy of it which you can show that's very beautiful. On the back is the scriptures about the establishment of the throne of David, and then the fact that Messiah will come and occupy the throne of David. $29 for this pretty thing, and I think you'll see this is a custom-made item you'll be proud to have, an inspiring one and a witnessing tool. So just ask for the House of David stone. We'll certainly know what you mean. You can order it from the post office box by mail or with credit card at the telephone number. And, if you want our Levitt letter, see what we're doing, that's free. Send us your name and address. Ask for the Levitt letter. You'll receive it at once. And Shalom Yerushalayim. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Praise